10 years ago, an orphaned boy saved a badly injured lion cub. No one could have imagined that a decade later, that same creature would return the favor. Across the vast African savanna, the land seemed to hold its breath beneath a dry, suffocating heat that had lingered for weeks. No rain, no bird song. Even the wind seemed afraid that a single gust might shatter the cracked earth for good. At the farthest edge of the plain stood a crooked little hut, leaning precariously among scorched grass and sun-bleached stones. This was home to Kito, 12 years old, an orphan since 3 years ago, the year hunger came for every home. That night, his mother had cradled her empty stomach and still tried to sing him to sleep. His father had gone out and never returned, leaving behind nothing but a blood-stained basket and silence. No one in the village took Kito in. They were too poor and too scared. Children who survive tragedy, they whispered, carry bad luck. The other kids avoided him. Adults glanced his way like he was some ghost that forgot it wasn't supposed to be seen in daylight. So Kito grew up in silence, under cold stares, with only the wind of the savannah to keep him company each night. Each morning, Kito rose before the sun. He combed through rocky outcrops, searching for roots or the remains of animals left behind by poachers. The things others feared no longer frightened Kito, because the worst had already happened to him. There was a place nearby the villagers called the Forbidden Zone, a stretch of land rumored to be littered with traps set by hunters, a place where people vanished without a trace. Children were strictly warned never to go near it. But to Kito, death was no stranger, and after 3 days with nothing in his stomach, fear didn't carry much weight anymore. One evening, stomach clenched in pain, Kito found himself standing at the edge of that no-man's land. Before him lay a barren stretch of earth. No trees, no shade. The wind carried the scent of rusted metal. And something warmer. Blood. He hadn't planned on crossing. At first, he just stood there, listening to the wind and scanning the horizon. But then a question crept into his mind. If there's nothing here, why forbid it? In a heartbeat, he stepped across the line. Ahead, the ground was jagged with sharp stones and waist-high grass. Each step he took, he strained to hear anything, any movement. There was no one around. But then, he heard it. A low whimper, followed by silence. The tension inside Kito kept rising. His sharpened senses picked up even the smallest sounds, every snap of a twig beneath his feet might mean a hidden snare. Every faint growl might signal a wounded predator nearby. But the silence was even worse. No traps, no creatures, just the wind and his own pounding heartbeat as he crept around a withered bush. Then he froze. Kito couldn't believe what he was seeing. Lying just a few steps away was a lion cub. Its tiny mane was matted with dried blood, and its body was tangled in a snare, thick steel wire, the kind poachers used for deadly traps. The cable had sliced deep into the cub's flesh, leaving raw, bleeding wounds. This trap was meant for antelope or zebras, but it had caught something much bigger. Kito held his breath. His instinct screamed. Lions are predators. It could tear me apart if I get too close. If the hunters find me here, they'll think I tampered with the trap. He stepped back just a little. His chest tightened. His heart pounded so fast it hurt to breathe. His hands shook as if he were the one caught in the wire. And then a memory struck like lightning. His father, slammed to the ground by a group of strangers, men with guns and eyes as cold as stone. His father had tried to free a trapped antelope. That was the last time Kito ever saw him. No one buried him. No one searched. The memory wasn't a dream. It was a blade. Kito wanted to run, turn around, pretend he hadn't seen anything. But then the cub opened its eyes. Amber eyes locked with his. Not fierce, not wild, but exhausted, in pain. A low growl slipped out, more like a broken whimper than a threat. It had clearly been trapped for hours, maybe longer, growing weaker with every failed attempt to escape. And now, in that moment, Kito stood before a choice that would change everything. He took a breath, then another. And then, slowly, he stepped closer. Kito slowly reached for the cloth satchel at his side, never taking his eyes off the lion cub. One wrong move could cost him his life. But letting the animal die, that wasn't an option. His instincts were screaming, a wounded predator, unpredictable, especially when cornered. And yet, something deep inside him whispered that the cub understood that Kito wasn't a threat. "Hang in there, buddy," he murmured, pulling a dull knife from his bag. "I'm here to help. Don't do anything crazy. We're going to get through this." Inch by inch. Kito began working on the trap. The wire resisted him, already sunk so deep it made his own fingers bleed as he tugged. He didn't stop. Sweat stung his eyes, mixing with dust as the minutes dragged on. Every time he grabbed a new loop of wire, he braced for teeth or claws, but the lion cub didn't lash out. It flinched with each sharp pull of the wire, pain flashing in its eyes, but it didn't fight. It just stared at his hands, watching each movement with wary focus. Another tug, harder this time. The wire snapped back, slicing his skin. His blood mixed with the lion's. The air reeked of iron. Kito clenched his teeth and kept going. Pull, bleed, gasp, pull again. It took nearly 10 minutes. Finally, the last coil came free, and with it, another rush of blood. The cub let out a shaky breath and collapsed to the ground. Kito exhaled in silence. He knelt beside the animal, pulling out a strip of cloth and wrapping it tightly around the cub's leg, firm and steady. Then he poured water from his small bottle, gently rinsing the wound. The cub twitched, startled, but didn't strike. Its breathing was ragged. And yet, something had shifted. There was something new in its eyes, a flicker of relief, maybe even gratitude. Kito shook the thought from his head. It didn't make sense. Still, in that quiet, blood-stained moment, something passed between them, an unspoken understanding. Night was falling. Kito knew he couldn't leave the cub there. Its blood would draw hyenas, and worse, poachers. He scanned the landscape for somewhere to hide it. Then he remembered, behind a stone outcrop not far from here, there was a shallow cave, more like a pocket carved into the rock by years of rain. About 100 meters away, the ground between was rough, littered with sharp stones. Kito tied a piece of rope gently around the lion's body, then, inch by inch, dragged it across the parched earth. Sweat soaked through his shirt. His hands bled from the rocks that tore at his skin. It took him more than half an hour, but finally he pulled the cub into the shelter of the hollow. He laid it on its side, padding grass beneath its belly. The lion was breathing, shallow but steady. That night, Kito didn't go back to his hut. He curled up at the cave's entrance, one hand gripping the rope, like a lifeline between two lonely creatures, a boy and a lion. In the days that followed, Kito lived between two worlds. By day, he roamed the savannah for scraps. He wasn't hunting, he had no weapons. Instead, He searched for animal remains left behind by poachers, the things they didn't bother to take. By night, he slept beside Kuma. That's what he named the lion. Not as a pet, not as a beast, but as a friend. Kuma meant companion. Each time Kuma whimpered in pain, Kito would rise, wipe the sweat from its brow, whisper words no one had ever taught him, words that came straight from the heart. But luck, as always, was not something Kito could count on. One morning, fresh blood on the rocks, still wet, caught the eye of a passing hunter. He followed the trail, drawing closer and closer to the place where Kito had hidden Kuma. Without thinking, Kito sprang out from the opposite side, clutching a speckled ground bird he'd just caught. "Mister, I was looking for a bird's nest." The man narrowed his eyes. His gaze swept the area before he raised his rifle, aimed it straight at Kito's chest. "No one comes here looking for birds, kid. What are you hiding?" Kito swallowed hard. His eyes stayed steady, but his heart thundered like it would tear through his ribs. I saw blood. Thought maybe something was hurt. I'm hungry." That last part? I'm hungry. Seemed to hit something soft in the man, a piece of him not yet turned to stone. He lowered the rifle. "Next time, stay away from the traps. Kids like you disappear out here. No one will notice." He walked off. Kito didn't move until the man's figure disappeared completely. Then the trembling started, not from fear for himself, but for Kuma. If the hunter had found the cub, neither of them would have had a chance. In the days that followed, Kuma began to recover. Kito brought water, scavenged for food, cared for the lion with a quiet devotion that became second nature. At first, Kuma barely moved. Then he began to push himself upright. A few unsteady steps, then more. Soon, when Kito approached, the cub no longer growled, but gently licked his hand. By the third month, Kuma ran. Not a shaky stumble, but full strides. Each day he roamed farther, his paw prints trailing deep into the dry grass beyond the ridge. The wound on his hind leg had faded into a silvery scar. Kito began preparing for what he knew was coming. He never said it out loud, but every time he looked at Kuma, his chest tightened. Sometimes, as if sensing it too, Kuma would pause at a distance, look back toward the cave, and then keep going, as if practicing for the goodbye. Kuma grew fast. In just a few months, the frail cub had become strong, muscular, alert. The wound on his leg had healed completely, leaving only a faint scar wrapped around his hind leg. Kito still brought food every day, but Kuma had begun to eat less, as if something deeper, wilder, was calling him back to the plains. His eyes often drifted far, to the savanna, to the places untouched by humans. One morning, Kito arrived with a small piece of meat, but Kuma was gone. Panic surged through him. He searched everywhere, heart pounding, afraid the lion had been captured. But then, from a distance, in the soft light of dawn, Kuma returned. He wasn't hungry. He had come to say goodbye. Kito understood. They both did. He reached into his satchel and pulled out a strip of cloth, gently tied it around Kuma's neck, just like he had the day he saved him. Then, just as gently, he untied it and let it fall to the ground. Kuma turned, walked a few steps, then stopped. He looked back, and in his eyes there was memory, recognition, farewell. Then, without a sound, he ran, strong, silent, free. Kito stood still, watching. Only when Kuma's shape vanished into the tall grass, back into the wild, did he finally sink to the ground. Weeks turned into months, and life settled back into its old rhythm, scavenging the rocky plains, foraging for roots, surviving the land. 10 years had passed, and step by step, Kito had found his way back to familiarity. Early mornings, daily patrols, careful notes, and rescue missions. No longer the skinny boy he once was, Kito was now a full-fledged ranger, reliable, calm, always present when trouble struck. The job wasn't easy. Sometimes it meant trekking deep into the forest to repair broken sensor cameras. Other times, tracking poachers through faint trails. Many days were spent nursing injured animals, injecting medicine, cleaning wounds, and carrying them to safety. He wasn't much of a talker, didn't care for noise. But everyone knew, if something needed to be found, tracks, patterns, anomalies, Kito would find it. He understood the wild like it was an extension of himself. That day, a distress call came in over the ranger station radio. Armed international poachers had breached the core zone of the preserve. Equipped with GPS trackers and weapons, they were slaughtering elephants and lions. Several sensor cameras had been destroyed. Kito didn't wait for orders. He grabbed his pack, strapped on his machete, and headed out, alone. He followed faint prints in the dirt, droppings and the acrid trace of gunpowder drifting on the wind. The deeper he went, the thicker the canopy became, darkening the forest floor. Something about the forest felt unnaturally quiet. Wham! The ground disappeared beneath him. He dropped into a pit, more than 3 meters deep, camouflaged with dry leaves and packed dirt. Before he could catch his breath, 3 figures appeared at the rim of the hole. Camouflage gear, faces covered, each armed with a semi-automatic rifle. Clever little jackal knows how to track, one sneered in a thick Eastern European accent. Kill him now, another muttered. Less trouble later. Kito gasped for breath, his fingers clawing at the edge of the pit, searching for any way out. But there was nothing, just the trap, and 3 rifles pointed straight at him. A wave of panic surged through him. He had nowhere left to run. Then, from the void, something moved. A golden blur streaked across the forest floor. A lion appeared like a phantom, leaping over the mouth of the pit. Its roar, furious and defiant, shook the air. Kito had never seen anything like it. A full-grown male lion, massive, with a long scar trailing from his hind leg to his flank, the place where a trap had once cut deep. Kito knew instantly. It was Kuma. There was no mistaking him. No one else could look like that. Kito stood frozen. His heart no longer beat in rhythm. It thundered, wild and chaotic. In a blink, all 3 hunters turned pale. Their mouths dropped open, eyes wide with disbelief. The first man didn't even have time to react before Kuma slammed into him like a boulder, flinging his body through the air. He hit the ground hard, limbs flailing, gasping before falling still, his body twitching in shock. The second fumbled for his gun, hands shaking, but Kuma spun with the grace of a born predator, swiped the weapon with a single powerful blow. The rifle clattered across the rocks. The man toppled backward, slamming into a tree, letting out a strangled gasp. Kuma didn't bite. He didn't need to. He planted both front paws on the man's chest, pinning him to the earth like a nailed warning. Then the lion growled. Not loud, not echoing, but low, deep and long. A sound that crawled into the man's ears like a voice from the grave. The hunter trembled, rigid, paralyzed. The fear in his eyes had gone beyond survival instinct. It was terror, pure, soul-shaking terror before something greater than he could understand or control. The third man, he didn't raise his gun. He ran. not like a man, like a hunted animal. He crashed into the underbrush, shrieking a high, broken sound like air escaping from a dying thing. His eyes rolled white, feet stumbling over roots, but he didn't stop, didn't look back. He ran like the devil was swallowing his shadow, and in the middle of it all stood Kuma, still, towering. His dark mane rippling in the breeze, his body gleaming under the sun like living bronze. But his eyes, those eyes, weren't just those of a predator. They were the eyes of an ancient god of the wild, delivering judgment to those who defied the law of nature for greed. He didn't kill. He protected. Kito stepped forward, cautiously, barely able to comprehend what had just happened. A wild lion had risked everything for him. His hands were bloody from cuts, his knees weak with exhaustion, but he had to get closer to the one who had just saved his life. The ranger moved carefully, expecting the lion to pull away. Wild animals don't like to show weakness. But Kuma didn't retreat. He simply turned his head, and their eyes met. And in that moment, Kito did something he had never dared before. He knelt beside the wild lion, just like the first day they met. He reached out and placed his hand in Kuma's thick mane. "You saved me," Kito whispered. He could feel Kuma's heartbeat beneath his palm, racing, exhausted, but strong. "Now we're even. Now we're brothers." When the other rangers finally found them, hours later, they couldn't believe what they saw. Kito sitting on a stone, and next to him, a massive lion, lying calmly, letting the man tend to him. No one dared to come closer, afraid of provoking the beast, but it wasn't necessary. Kito simply stood, walked toward them, and Kuma watched him go, making no move to follow. Just days later, footage from a ranger's body cam went viral across social media. Global headlines dubbed it the reunion of man and the wild. Millions of views, shares, and comments poured in, from city kids who'd only ever seen lions behind glass at zoos, to seasoned biologists who had to admit this is behavior never before recorded in a wild lion. Kito and Kuma became a living symbol of a bond that defied every boundary, between human and nature, between past and present. Skeptics called it coincidence. Romantics called it gratitude. Researchers booked flights, hoping to study the unique interspecies connection. Tourists lined up for safari tours, hoping to catch a glimpse of the famed lion guardian and his human friend. But Kito knew their bond wasn't meant for spectacle or scientific journals. After the incident with the poachers, Kito became more reserved, less seen in public. But out on the savannah, during his patrols, he'd sometimes catch sight of a familiar figure on the hilltops, beneath baobab shadows. Sometimes Kuma followed him for miles. Other times, he simply watched from afar, as if to reassure himself that the man was still safe. The wounds Kito had suffered from the poachers' wire traps eventually healed, leaving only a few pale scars across his sun-worn skin and golden ranger uniform. Silent reminders of a friendship that began in blood and danger and became legend. 10 years ago, Kito had nothing but scraps of cloth and an unbroken heart. He saved a creature that wasn't his own. No promise, no reward. He knelt down simply because he couldn't look away. And that quiet act, small, unseen, led to something no one could have predicted. Kuma came back. Not as a trained animal, but as a friend who kept his promise. The story of Kito and Kuma is a reminder of something simple yet profound. Sometimes, a life is saved by the quiet kindness of one person. Not by greatness, not by heroism, but by choosing not to turn away. Sometimes all it takes is one person, in one moment, to reach out. In a world facing ecological collapse, climate change, and mass extinction, this story stands as a wake-up call. Thousands of wild species are being pushed to the edge of extinction by human greed. Every ivory trinket, every fur coat, every bone-carved souvenir, each one is a bullet into the heart of nature's balance. Kuma was one of the lucky few who got saved, but there are thousands more, with no one like Kito. So if you're watching this story, don't let it be just another touching video. Take action, share it, spread the message that nature remembers, and nature will return if we give it a reason to. Support conservation efforts. Say no to products made from endangered wildlife. Teach your children to love nature, to respect all living things. And if this story meant something to you, please hit like to show your support and subscribe to follow more extraordinary journeys like this one.